I and Oppos, Emily Carter, 32 years old. 6 weeks ago I woke up from a 9-hour spinal surgery and the first thing I saw on my phone was 73 missed calls. My vision was still foggy from anesthesia when I pressed play on the voicemail from my father. His voice sounded calm, almost cheerful. "We sold your condo to help pay for your sister and Oppo's wedding. You were unconscious, so we signed for you. $425,000 gone in a single day. My younger sister and Oppo's wedding was 3 weeks away. I could barely move my legs. They felt detached, like they belonged to someone else. Lying in that recovery room staring at a ceiling tile with a crack shaped like a river, I made one phone call. What happened after that phone call changed everything. Before I explain how it all unraveled, let me take you back 7 weeks earlier to the day I finally got my surgery date. I had been living with constant pain since I was 29. Herniated discs at L4 and L5. Some mornings I could not get out of bed. Other days I pushed through because rent and bills do not care how much your spine hurts. When the neurologist said we have a date, I felt something I had almost forgotten how to feel. Relief. March 15th. A 9-hour procedure and 6 weeks of recovery. That night I called my parents. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from hope. I told my mom about the surgery date. Her response was distracted. I could hear my sister laughing somewhere behind her. "March," she repeated slowly. "That is right in the middle of wedding planning. You know your sister is getting married in April." I said I knew, but I needed help getting home after surgery. She told me I would figure it out like I always do. Then she hung up to go pick out centerpieces. I sat on my couch holding my phone and staring at nothing. I was not surprised. That was the part that hurt the most. I was never the priority. When I graduated college, my parents skipped the ceremony because my sister had an audition. When I bought my condo at 27, my father asked why I had not given that money to my sister instead. Over time I learned not to expect support from them. I handled everything myself. The week before surgery I hired a home care aide, prepped meals and set up a bed in my living room. Not once did my parents offer help. They did call asking if I could contribute more money to the wedding fund. My mother told me the venue alone cost $80,000 and the dress was over $20,000. She said my sister deserved it. I reminded her I had already given money for the engagement party. She said that was different. 5 days before surgery she hung up on me when I said I could not give more. That night I stood in my condo and looked around. 8 years of saving overtime and skipped vacations were in those walls. That space was proof that I had built something on my own. I had no idea how quickly that proof was about to be taken from me. People often ask why that condo mattered so much to me. $425,000 in Southern California does not buy much. 800 square feet. 1 bedroom. A narrow balcony barely big enough for a chair and a coffee mug. But that place was never about size or resale value. It was about survival. When I was 12, my father told me I was not the pretty one in the family. He said it like a fact, not an insult. He added that I was the smart one and that I would have to work harder, but I would be fine. Work harder became the rule of my life. I worked harder in school. Scholarships covered most of college and I paid the rest myself. I worked harder after graduation, climbing step by step until I could finally afford something that was mine. Buying that condo at 27 felt like planting a flag. No one co-signed. No one helped. No one celebrated. But I did. Every morning I drank coffee on that tiny balcony and reminded myself that I existed without permission. There was something else my parents never talked about. 5 years earlier they almost lost their house. Foreclosure notices. Late-night phone calls filled with panic. They owed $180,000. I gave them $30,000. Everything I had saved toward upgrading to a larger place. My father promised they would pay me back. They never did. They never even mentioned it again. So when I went into surgery I did not know they had finally found a way to take what was left. On March 15 the hospital lights were blinding. A nurse checked my 4. The anesthesiologist explained the process. She told me to count backward from 10. I remember getting to 7. 9 hours later I woke up in recovery. Every part of me hurt. My back burned. My throat was raw. Even blinking felt like work. A nurse smiled and said the surgery went well. She handed me my phone and told me my family had been calling non-stop. 73 missed calls. Dozens of messages. I assumed something had gone wrong with the wedding. I listened to my father's voicemail recorded while I was still on the operating table. He sounded relaxed. Proud even. He said they sold my condo. He said they signed for me because I was unavailable. He said the money was going to my sister's wedding and that I would understand. I listened again and again. I did not cry. I did not scream. Something inside me went very still. Clear. Cold. 2 hours later I called my father. My voice did not shake. I told him he sold my home. He said they moved quickly and that I would have agreed anyway. I told him forging my signature was a felony. He said I was being dramatic. I told him he would regret this. He hung up. My mother called next. She accused me of upsetting him. She said they borrowed the money. She said my sister's wedding was the most important day of her life. I reminded her I had just undergone major surgery. She said I was selfish. I asked her who owned the house they were living in. She laughed and said they did. I told her I would see her at the wedding and ended the call. 3 weeks. That was all I needed. The third call I made that day was to the only family member I trusted. My Aunt Linda. She was my father's older sister and the only person in my family who ever treated me like I mattered. She answered on the first ring. Emily, sweetheart, I heard what happened. Her voice was calm but I could hear the anger underneath it. Your father called me trying to explain. He thought I would side with him. I told him he was out of his mind. I asked her if she could keep a secret for 3 weeks. She paused and then asked what I was planning. I told her not everything, just enough. The surgery. The wedding date. The phone call I was about to make to my lawyer. When I finished she was quiet for a long moment. Once you do this, she said, there is no going back. They will never forgive you. They sold my home while I was unconscious on an operating table. Forgiveness ended the moment they did that. She exhaled slowly and told me she would help. I asked her to hold on to an envelope for me and to bring it to the wedding if anything happened. She promised she would be there. There was something I had never told anyone. For years earlier I had received a call from a college friend who worked at a bank. She told me my parents were about to lose their house. $180,000 in debt. Foreclosure in 60 days. I sat in my condo staring at the wall after that call. The same parents who never showed up for me were about to lose everything. I had a choice. Let them fall. Or step in again. I called a real estate attorney named Mark Reynolds. I asked him if it was possible to buy my parents' debt anonymously through an LLC. He told me it was unconventional but legal. 3 weeks later I owned their house. They thought a faceless investment company had saved them. They signed a lease and paid rent every month. They never knew it was me. I did not do it for revenge. I did it because I still loved them. I wanted them to have a home even if they never gave me one. 3 days after my surgery, Mark came to my hospital room with documents from the condo sale. It was worse than we thought. They had used a forged power of attorney. The notary stamp belonged to someone already flagged for fraudulent behavior. The buyer was innocent. The sale could not be reversed easily. But my parents were exposed to serious criminal charges if I chose to pursue them. Then Mark The next day she posted online a photo of herself crying in a bridal shop. She accused me of being jealous and bitter. Family members flooded the comments with sympathy for her. My phone filled with messages telling me to apologize. Not one person asked for my side. I saved everything. Screenshots. Messages. Comments. Every word. The wedding was 14 days away. 2 days before the wedding there was a rehearsal dinner. I did not want to go. My back still hurt and every step felt like fire traveling up my spine. But I needed to see them. I needed to understand the room before I stood in it for real. The restaurant was an upscale Italian place downtown. Private room. White tablecloths. Candles everywhere. I knew the cost because my sister had posted it proudly online. $12,000 for one dinner. I arrived late walking slowly with a cane. The room went quiet when I stepped inside. Conversation stopped. My mother looked startled. My father tightened his jaw. My sister whispered something to her fiancé and squeezed his arm. My mother recovered first and smiled at me the way she always did when she wanted control. We did not think you would make it with your condition. I told her I would not miss it. I took a seat at the far end of the table. My father stood and raised his glass. He talked about family. About sacrifice. About everything they had done for their children. He avoided looking at me until the very end. Then he said family takes care of family. I raised my glass and said nothing. My sister's fiancé watched me closely. There was curiosity in his eyes. Confusion. Like he sensed something he could not yet name. At the end of the night my sister approached me. She said she was surprised I came. I told her I had a gift for her. Something she would see on the wedding day. Her smile flickered with suspicion. The wedding day arrived bright and warm. The venue was a luxury hotel with a garden courtyard. White flowers everywhere. Crystal lights. 200 guests. Everything whispered money. I arrived with my aunt. We wore similar colors without planning it. Navy. Simple. We looked like a team. I sat in the last row. As my sister walked down the aisle in her expensive dress she smiled at me. Confident. Certain she had won. The ceremony was flawless. Vows. Rings. Applause. When the officiant asked if anyone objected several heads turned toward me. I stayed still. Not yet. At the reception I was seated at a table near the kitchen. The forgotten relatives table. Dinner was extravagant. Steak. Lobster. Wine that cost more than my groceries for a month. My father stood to give a toast. He talked about unity and generosity. Then he mentioned contributions. He looked at me and invited me to say a few words. 200 faces turned toward me. I stood slowly using my cane. Every step toward the stage felt deliberate. Heavy. I took the microphone and looked at my sister. I thanked my father. I said he was right. I had contributed a great deal to the wedding. The room went silent. I told them about my surgery. About being unconscious. About my parents selling my condo using forged documents. About $425,000. Gasps spread through the crowd. I pulled out the documents. I told them I was not there to ruin the wedding. I was there to give a gift. I told them I owned my parents' house. That I had saved it from foreclosure years earlier. That their lease expired in 30 days. My mother stood up shaking. My father shouted. My sister's face drained of color. My lawyer stepped forward and confirmed everything. The room exploded into chaos. My sister's fiancé demanded to know where the wedding money came from. My mother could not answer. His parents stood and asked to speak privately. My sister chased him off the stage crying. I picked up the microphone one last time and said I did not do this for revenge. I did it because I deserved to be treated like a human being. Then I walked out. I did not leave the venue right away. I walked out into the hotel garden and sat on a stone bench beneath a row of tall palms. The air felt cool against my skin. My hands were steady. I expected to feel something sharp or triumphant. Instead I felt empty. Guests began drifting out in clusters. Some avoided looking at me. Others stared openly. A few relatives approached with awkward apologies. My cousin said he did not know the full story. I nodded and let him walk away. Then my great-aunt approached and squeezed my hand. She told me my grandmother would have been proud of me. That nearly broke me. The person I did not expect to see was my sister's mother-in-law. She sat beside me with careful posture. She told me they had no idea where the money came from. She said her son was devastated and questioning everything. She looked at me for a long moment and said she believed I did the right thing. Then she stood and walked back inside. From the tent I could hear raised voices. My father yelling. My mother crying. My sister emerged briefly looking furious, then disappeared again. About an hour later my sister's husband found me. His tuxedo was rumpled and his bow tie was loose. He looked like someone who had aged years in a single afternoon. He told me something he had never told anyone. Months earlier his laptop had gone missing after he stayed at my sister's apartment. She claimed it was stolen. Nothing else had been taken. That laptop contained financial records and family information. At the time he thought it was bad luck. Now everything made sense. He told me he believed my sister targeted him for his family's wealth. That the relationship had been engineered. That the proposal and wedding were part of a plan. He said his family had already contacted their attorney. They were filing for an annulment based on fraud. The marriage was not even a day old. He walked away without waiting for a response. The fallout came quickly. Someone recorded my speech and shared it with extended family. Then it spread beyond that. My father's employer placed him on leave pending review. My mother lost her social circle almost overnight. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. My sister lost followers online. Real people vanished. Only the fake accounts remained. The annulment was finalized in record time. My sister was ordered to return money she did not have. She took a retail job within a week. I heard she cried when she told my mother. 30 days after the wedding my father called. He asked about the house. He said they had nowhere to go. I told him the notice was legal and final. He accused me of being cruel. I reminded him of the condo. He told me I was no longer his daughter. I told him I never had been. Then I hung up. 2 months later I walked through the empty house they left behind. The rooms echoed. I felt sadness, not victory. My aunt told me I was grieving the hope that they would ever love me properly. I decided to rent the house and donate the income to a foundation that helps people facing financial abuse from family. It felt right. My body healed faster than my heart. I stopped using the cane. I moved into a small apartment. Temporary but mine. My sister sent one message telling me I destroyed everything. I did not respond. I saw my mother months later in a park. She looked older. Smaller. We sat in silence. She did not apologize. She walked away. I felt nothing. Just finality. Life did not magically improve after that day. There was no sudden peace or sense of victory. What followed was quieter and heavier. The kind of silence that comes after something breaks beyond repair. In the weeks after the wedding I focused on healing. Physical therapy twice a week. Slow walks around my neighborhood. Learning how to trust my body again. Pain, I placed the cane in the back of my closet. A reminder of how far I had come. 3 months later I ran into my mother again by chance. She looked tired. We exchanged a few words. Nothing changed. I did not expect it to. I learned something important in that season. Closure does not always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes when you stop waiting for them. I stopped hoping my parents would suddenly understand. I stopped replaying conversations in my head. I stopped trying to fix something that was never mine to fix. Healing came slowly. Through routine. Through distance. Through choosing myself without guilt. I began volunteering with a support group that helped people recover from financial abuse within families. Hearing their stories reminded me I was not alone. Patterns repeat everywhere. Silence enables them. My life grew quieter but stronger. I slept better. I laughed more easily. I felt grounded in a way I never had before. The loss of my family was real. But so was the freedom. A year passed without contact. No holidays. No birthdays. No accidental calls meant for someone else. The silence became normal. Not painless, but familiar. I built routines that belonged only to me. Morning walks. Cooking dinners instead of eating standing up. Letting my life take up space without apologizing for it. I stopped explaining my choices to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. Occasionally someone from my extended family would reach out. Most conversations were awkward. A few were sincere. Some admitted they had believed the version of the story that was easiest. Others never apologized but acted as if nothing had happened. I learned who was safe and who was not. My aunt remained steady. She told me my father had aged quickly. Stress. Regret. Pride mixed together into something heavy. I listened without comment. Knowing did not mean engaging. My sister tried to reach out once through a long message. She said therapy was hard. That she was learning about entitlement and avoidance. That she was angry at our parents and herself. She did not apologize for the condo. She did not take responsibility for her role. I did not reply. Forgiveness without accountability is just permission. Daniel remarried 2 years later. He sent me a simple announcement. A photo of him and his wife holding their newborn daughter. He wrote that he hoped I was well. I smiled at that one. I wished them happiness quietly and meant it. I was 34 when I bought my second home. Smaller than the condo but brighter. Sunlight poured through the windows in the afternoon. I walked through the empty rooms alone and felt grounded. Ownership felt different this time. Less like proof. More like peace. I placed my keys on the counter and sat on the floor. I did not cry. I laughed once. Soft and surprised. Some people think the hardest part of betrayal is the moment it happens. They are wrong. The hardest part is what comes after. The rewiring. The letting go of who you thought people were. The acceptance that love does not always come from where you expect it. I learned that boundaries are not walls. They are doors you choose when to open. I learned that family is not defined by blood but by behavior. I learned that protecting yourself is not selfish. If you are listening to this and recognizing your own story in mine, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not required to sacrifice yourself to earn love. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to choose peace. The day I stopped hoping my parents would change was the day my life truly began. There is a strange quiet that comes after you stop fighting a truth you have known for a long time. For me it arrived slowly. Not all at once. It showed up in small moments that used to hurt and suddenly did not. I noticed it the first time I went a full week without thinking about my parents. No anger. No sadness. Just space. At first that scared me. I had spent so many years orbiting their approval that the absence of that pull felt unnatural. Then it felt like freedom. I started paying attention to how my body responded to peace. My shoulders relaxed. I slept through the night. I stopped bracing myself every time my phone buzzed. I realized how much tension I had been carrying for decades without noticing. I also noticed how often people confuse endurance with strength. I had endured my family for years. That was not strength. Strength was finally choosing myself without justification. Without a speech. Without hoping someone would finally clap. The support group I volunteered with became a mirror. Story after story echoed the same pattern. One child becomes the responsible one. The dependable one. The silent one. The family builds expectations around that role and then resents the person who dares to step out of it. Listening to others helped me release the last pieces of guilt I did not know I was still holding. Guilt for surviving. Guilt for succeeding. Guilt for not fixing what was never mine to repair. I learned how often families weaponize obligation. How easily love becomes conditional when control is at stake. And how powerful it is to say no without explanation. There were still hard days. Holidays especially. Walking past families laughing together could sting. But the pain was different now. It did not pull me backward. It reminded me why I chose distance. I built new traditions. Friendsgiving dinners. Quiet mornings with coffee and sunlight. Long walks where my thoughts could wander without interruption. I learned that chosen family is not a consolation prize. It is often the healthiest option. I stopped telling my story to people who only wanted drama. I shared it with those who understood nuance. Those who knew that two things can be true at once. That you can love people and still leave them. That you can grieve and heal at the same time. The house I rented out continued to shelter a young couple starting their life. Knowing it was being used gently mattered to me. The rental income going to support others brought a sense of balance. Something taken had been transformed into something that helped. I never pressed charges. Not because my parents deserved mercy but because I deserved peace. Legal battles would have tied me to them longer than I was willing to allow. People sometimes ask if I regret what I did at the wedding. If I wish I had handled it quietly. Privately. With less damage. I always pause before answering. The truth is silence would have cost me more. It would have reinforced the lie that my pain was negotiable. That my boundaries were optional. Speaking up ended something but it also began everything else. I do not regret telling the truth in a room full of people who benefited from believing a lie. There is a version of me that might have swallowed it all. Who would have smiled and absorbed the loss and told herself family is family. That version of me would not have survived. I think about her sometimes. The woman I used to be. The one who believed if she just tried harder she would finally be chosen. I am grateful she found the courage to stop trying. If you are listening and standing at the edge of a similar decision, I want you to know something. You do not have to wait for permission to protect yourself. You do not have to prove your worth by suffering quietly. Walking away does not mean you failed. It means you finally listened. Time did what it always does. It moved forward whether I was ready or not. Months layered over months until the story that once consumed my every thought became something I could hold without shaking. I stopped introducing myself through pain. I stopped measuring my life by what I survived. I allowed myself to exist in the present instead of constantly explaining the past. People sometimes assume healing looks dramatic. Big moments. Final conversations. Tearful reunions. For me, healing was quiet. It looked like grocery shopping without dread. Like answering my phone without anxiety. Like making plans months ahead without worrying they would be disrupted by guilt or obligation. I learned how deeply family dynamics shape the way we see ourselves. How early messages become internal rules. Be useful. Be quiet. Do emotional quiet. My sister eventually stopped trying to contact me. That felt right. Whatever work she needed to do was hers alone. I no longer carried responsibility for anyone else's growth. I focused on building a life that felt honest. One that did not require justification. I invested in friendships that felt reciprocal. In conversations that did not drain me. In rest. The irony was not lost on me. The moment I stopped fighting for my place in my family was the moment I found my place in myself. If there is one thing I want you to take from my story, it is this. You are allowed to choose yourself even when the people you love do not understand. Especially then. Love that requires your silence is not love. Support that disappears when you set boundaries is not support. Family that benefits from your suffering is not family. You do not owe anyone access to you simply because of shared history. You owe yourself safety. You owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself peace. If you are standing at a crossroads wondering whether to speak or stay quiet, remember this. Silence may keep the peace temporarily, but it always costs you in the long run. Speak when you are ready. Walk away when you must. Rest when you can. Your worth does not come from endurance. It comes from being human. Today my life is smaller in some ways. Fewer people. Less noise. But it is fuller where it counts. I wake up without dread. I make choices without fear. I trust myself. I no longer chase belonging. I build it. If you listened all the way to the end, thank you. Not because you owe me anything, but because your time matters. And choosing to spend it here means something. If my story resonated with you, know that you are not alone. There are more of us than you think. Quietly rebuilding. Quietly choosing better. Take care of yourself. Protect your peace. And remember that walking away can sometimes be the bravest form of love there is.